The signal dropped on a Wednesday. I know this because I had just filed my 14th consecutive weekly harmonic report. And GT snorts. And GT, all of them reading the same thing. Earth nominal, Earth loud, Earth. Embarrassingly, aggressively. Wonderfully loud. 8 billion biological engines running at full noise. Wars bleeding into music, bleeding into traffic, bleeding into children screaming at each other over games I would never understand. The planet had been transmitting since the moment we found it 2 centuries ago, and in 2 centuries it had never once shut up. I am Veth Kalos, I am a chorus class diplomat of the Galactic Union, which means I was born into sound the way humans are born into oxygen. My species does not experience silence. We experience it the way a body experiences the absence of blood, not as quiet as wrong. Wednesday 14th report filed, harmonic. Tea cooling on my console, and then the feed from Earth's relay cluster returned. A reading I had never seen in 40 years of monitoring. Nothing. Not static. Static has texture. Static is something. This was the specific nothing of a frequency that had simply ceased to exist, the way a voice stops mid-sentence and the air where the words were feels heavier than the air around it. I ran the diagnostic 3 times. The equipment was fine. I ran it a 4th time because 40 years of bureaucratic caution had made me thorough in ways that occasionally annoyed my colleagues. Still fine, the equipment was reading correctly. Earth had gone silent. I filed a level 2 anomaly report. Equipment malfunction suspected. External relay interference possible. Recommend secondary scan within 48 hours. I went back to my tea. I told myself the most likely explanation was always the simplest one. I had been telling myself this for 40 years, and it had served me well. 48 hours later, still nothing. I filed level 3. A senior analyst named Korvath reviewed it, made a note, and asked me to continue monitoring. I continued monitoring. The silence continued silencing. By day 5, I had moved to level 4, which required a supervisor's signature and a formal union notification. By day 7, I was in a room with people whose titles had words in them I had only ever read in historical documents. The room was not quiet. 300 species know how to fill a room, but underneath all of it, running like a current beneath the noise, was something I can only describe in the translated approximation of a human word: dread. Because the Galactic Union had seen planetary silence before, not often, 4 times in recorded history, and every time the explanation was the same. The planet had gone quiet because there was nothing left on it to make noise. The word for it was extinction. The models came in fast. The Kethvil Science Division ran 17 probability cascades in the first hour. 13 of them pointed to internal collapse, biological, nuclear, atmospheric. Humanity had always carried those risks with a particular enthusiasm, the way they carried most dangerous things openly, loudly, full confidence that they personally would be the exception. The other 4 models pointed to external strike. Something had hit them. Something large enough, fast enough, complete enough to silence 8 billion voices between one Wednesday morning and the next. I sat in that room and listened to the models and watched the senior officials and did the thing my species does when we cannot process what we are hearing. I harmonized internally, a low, private frequency, a sound for no one but myself. It did not help. On the 9th day, a junior analyst named Parath II, very young recently appointed, the kind of young that had not yet learned which thoughts were too expensive to say out loud, raised her hand. The models assume involuntary silence. She said. The room waited. What if it was voluntary? The room did not wait after that. The room told her in the measured and professional language of 300 civilizations that voluntary global silence was not a coherent hypothesis. That 8 billion individuals represented the most reliably fractious, disagreement-prone species the Union had ever catalogued. That humanity could not agree on what to call a specific shade of blue, let alone agree to stop transmitting entirely. That the probability of unified, voluntary silence was so low as to function mathematically as zero. Parath II sat down. She did not argue, but I watched her face and she did not look convinced either. The emergency session produced 2 decisions. First, an investigative vessel would be dispatched to the Sol system immediately. Second, all Union members were advised to begin quiet contingency planning for a potential species loss event. I volunteered to monitor the relay cluster personally until the ship arrived. They said yes because no one else wanted the assignment. Watching a dead frequency is not interesting work. It is the kind of work that sits in your chest and does not move. I pressed my sensory membrane against the observation glass and looked at the blue dot that had gone quiet. In 200 years of monitoring, Earth had given us the complete works of something called Jazz, 140 diplomatic incidents, the cultural phenomenon of competitive eating, 17 near-extinction events that humanity survived through a combination of engineering and stubbornness, 42 wars that ended before they could be formally categorized in the single most chaotic first contact event in galactic history, during which humanity's initial response to meeting an alien species had been to argue publicly about whether the alien species was friendly, and then to argue about whether the arguing was appropriate, and then to offer the alien species a beverage. Now there was nothing. I kept my membrane on the glass for a long time. The thing I felt, the thing I had been searching my species' entire emotional vocabulary for, and have never precisely found, was this: I had spent 40 years monitoring a frequency, and in 40 years I had come to know its texture the way you know a familiar road. Earth's signal had a specific weight to it, chaotic, yes, overwhelming often, but underneath the chaos, consistent, present, alive in a way that was different from any other inhabited world I had ever tracked. The silence was not like the absence of noise. It was like the absence of something that had been holding something else in place. And whatever it had been holding, I realized standing at that glass on the 9th day of Earth's silence, I had never been entirely sure what it was. I was not sure I wanted to find out. By discovering it was gone. The investigative vessel departed on the 11th day. I watched it go from my console. I filed my 15th consecutive weekly harmonic report. Under current status, I wrote the only word that was accurate: unknown. Then I went back to the glass. Earth was still there, still blue, still Silent still, and this is the part that no model had been able to explain, the detail that kept Perth 2's face in my memory completely structurally, physically intact. No debris, no scarring, no distress. Beacons triggered automatically at the moment of catastrophic event. Just a planet that had decided, for reasons no one in that room could account for, to stop talking. I had studied humanity for 4 decades. I knew their history. I knew what they were capable of in both directions. I knew the breadth of them. And standing at that glass in the silence that was not quite silence, because it was made of the wrong kind of nothing, I realized I did not actually know them at all. That thought was the most frightening thing I had encountered in 40 years of diplomatic service. It was also, in some way I could not name, the most interesting. I got the news the way you get the worst kind of news, surrounded by strangers in a room that was not mine, with no warning and no softening, and no one who knew me well enough to put a hand on my shoulder and mean it. I am Commander Cira Vasquez. I was stationed at Relay Post Marantha 7 when Earth went quiet. 18 light months from home, far enough that the distance was not a number anymore. It was a physical condition, something snorts that lived in my rib cage and applied steady pressure. The duty officer who delivered the briefing was a Kethvil named Oren Saul. He was professional about it, which I appreciated more than he knew. He laid out the facts. Signal loss no confirmed. Cause investigation underway. He did not speculate. He did not offer condolences, which was correct because we did not yet have a confirmed reason for condolence. He asked if I needed anything. I said no. He left. I sat in the briefing room for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the chronometer on the wall and counted. The way you hold on to small precise things when the large imprecise things become too big to hold. Then I stood up, walked to my bunk, sat on the edge of it, and did the math. Distance, speed, time. I already knew the answer. I did the math anyway 3 times. The 3rd time, I used a different calculation method in case the first 2 had been wrong. They had not been wrong. I could not get home in time to matter. Whatever was happening, whatever had happened by the time I arrived, it would already be over in one direction or another. That was the fact. I sat with it for a while. Then I filed a formal request to be assigned to the investigative vessel being dispatched to Saul. The Union said yes faster than I expected. Token human, I understood. Liaison for optics, I did not care. I just needed to move. The vessel was called the Clarity of Record, which was the kind of name a committee invents when no one can agree on anything better. It was a Union science ship, 12 crew members, representing 7 species plus me. The senior xenobiologist was a chorus class named Wethpalos, who had, by his own account, documented 43 first contact anomalies and was deeply excited about number 44. The captain was a Marantha-class officer named Disako, calm in the particular way of people who have learned to make calm a professional tool. I was the only human aboard. I noticed the way the crew treated me. Not unkindly, never unkindly, but carefully. They gave me more space than regulations required. When I entered a room, conversations did not stop. Exactly, but they shifted, adjusted, like water moving around a stone slowly. So the stone does not notice. They were watching me the way you watch. Something fragile, something that might break at an unexpected moment and cause damage on the way down. I spent the transit doing things that kept my hands busy: equipment checks, protocol reviews, language refreshers on 3 Union dialects I barely used. At night I lay on my bunk and did the distance math again. I kept arriving at the same answer and doing it anyway. At some point this stopped being math and became something else, a ritual, a way of staying connected to the problem rather than to the space around it. We dropped out of faster than light travel at the outer edge of the Sol system on day 19. Earth was there. I had not realized until that moment that I had been bracing for it not to be. Some part of me, operating below the level of the math, had been preparing for a debris field, for an asteroid belt, where a planet used to be, for the specific nothing that means something is gone rather than silent. But Earth was there, blue and white and round and exactly the right size and in exactly the right place. No debris field, no atmospheric discoloration, no emergency beacon activation which triggers automatically in the first millisecond of any catastrophic planetary event and cannot be manually suppressed. Just a planet sitting there quiet. With Apollos made a sound I had never heard from a chorus class before. I think it was the xenobiological equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. The captain ordered a full spectrum scan. The results took 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I counted those 2 cities standing, infrastructure active, power grids running, agriculture mid-harvest on the northern continents, rotation schedule, which meant whatever had happened during a period of normal seasonal activity. Ecosystems nominal across all biomes. Atmosphere clean, water systems flowing. And humans present, billions of them. Moving through streets, driving. Vehicles operating machinery, sitting. In parks. Not dead. Just not transmitting. Weth Paulos delivered his analysis in the tone scientists use when the data is producing something their framework cannot accommodate. He used words like unprecedented and anomalous and outside model parameters. He used 17 of his degrees and arrived with great thoroughness at the conclusion that he did not know what was happening. I asked to go down. The captain looked at me the way the crew had been looking at me since we boarded. Carefully. Quarantine protocol applies, she said. Unknown phenomenon, possible. Environmental or cognitive cause. We cannot risk contamination in either direction. I pointed out that I was human, that the planet below was human, and that if there was a cognitive cause, it had presumably already been cognitively causing things to me at a genetic level for my entire life. The captain said that was precisely why she was concerned. I did not argue further, not then. I went to the observation deck instead and stood at the window and looked at Earth and did something I had not done in 19 days. I stopped doing the math. The math kept telling me I was too far and too late and too limited. The math was a comfort and a cage simultaneously. I put it down and just looked at the planet and thought about my mother, who lived in Sao Paulo and who had the infuriating habit of being calm about things that were not calm situations, who had looked at every crisis in Sierra Vasquez's life, and there had been several with the same expression person wears when they have seen enough of the world to understand that most Things eventually resolve. I wondered what she was doing right now. Whether she was in the market, whether she was sitting in her kitchen with the window open because she liked the street noise, whether the street noise was there. I stood at the window for a long time. Then I went to my bunk, I lay down, I closed my eyes. I thought about the quarantine rotation schedule which I had memorized, not out of any particular intention, but because I memorize schedules the way some people memorize song lyrics automatically, involuntarily, a brain function that had served me well in certain professional situations and was serving me now. I thought about the shuttle bay on deck 6. The survey craft were two-person vessels but could be operated solo with minor adjustment. I had flown single-seat craft since I was 17. The atmospheric entry window for Sao Paulo's longitude was optimal between 3:00 and 5:00 in the morning ship time. The crew rotation on deck 6 changed at 300. I thought about all of this very calmly, the way my mother thought about things. Then I went to sleep. I set my alarm for 2:45. The morning came the way mornings always come, without asking permission. I got up, I put on my flight suit, the Union Issue 1 standard gray, the kind that every relay officer in the fleet wore. I clipped my communication badge. I did not take a weapon because there was nothing down there to aim one at. I did not take extra equipment because extra equipment would slow me down. I walked to deck 6. The rotation had just changed. The new officer on duty was a young Marantha class named Velos, who was 11 days into his first posting and was therefore simultaneously very alert and very uncertain about which situations required intervention. He watched me walk to survey craft number 3. He watched me run the pre-flight check. He said, "Commander Vasquez, this bay is under quarantine protocol." I said, "I know." He said, "I'm required to log any unauthorized departure." I said, "I know that too, log it." He looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone doing rapid calculations about rank, protocol, and the specific look in my eyes, which I have been told is not a look that invites further discussion. He logged it. I sealed the cockpit and ran the engine sequence and lifted off before anyone on the bridge had time to respond to the log entry. By the time Captain DeSacco's voice came through the comm asking me to hold position, I was already at the bay doors. The bay doors were on an automated safety override. They opened for any active engine signature below a certain tonnage. The survey craft was below that tonnage. The doors opened. I went through them. Behind me, the comm filled with voices. Union protocol language, official terminology for unauthorized departure. A request very firm, very official to return to the vessel immediately. Then atmosphere, cloud layer, the voices went to static. I was alone in a way I had not been in 19 days. Alone with the controls and the orange heat of entry and the clouds coming up fast in the brown-green shape of a continent I recognized below. Sao Paulo's coordinates were already in the nav system. I had entered them the night before. I came in low over the city and looked down at it through the cockpit glass and felt the thing break open in my chest that I had been holding closed with math for 19 days. The streets were full, traffic moving, markets open, afternoon sun on glass, buildings I had grown up looking at. Schoolyard, I could see it clearly from this altitude, with children running in. Complicated patterns that might have been a game. Nobody looked up. I sat down in a park on the north side. Killed the engine, sat for a moment with my hands on the controls. Then I picked up my helmet, tucked it under my arm, and walked out into the Sao Paulo afternoon like I had simply gone for a very long drive. A woman at a fruit stall 20 m away glanced at my gray Union flight suit. She looked at my face, she looked back at her fruit. "You are back early," she said in Portuguese mildly, "the way you nota change in the weather." I looked at her, at the normal street. Behind her, at the completely, structurally, peacefully intact city. That should not have been any of those things. "What happened?" I asked. My Portuguese was rusty. The words came out slightly crooked. She picked up a mango, examined it, put it down, picked up another one. "We voted," she said. I stood on a sidewalk in Sao Paulo in a Union flight suit with a helmet under my arm, and the entire Galactic Union fleet snorts in orbit above me, waiting for an explanation. "All of you," I said. "It took about 6 weeks," she said. Final count was very clear. She held out the mango. I bought it. Without thinking, I stood there holding it. She went back to her fruit. I started walking toward my mother's apartment. The street was loud, normal. Loud market noise and engine noise and someone's music from a third floor window, and 2 people arguing about something with great energy and zero urgency. Earth was not silent at all. Earth had just stopped talking to us. The shuttle hit the cloud layer at 6,000 m, and the comm went to static, and everything above that cloud layer stopped being my problem. Below me, Sao Paulo in the afternoon, my mother's city, 8 million people who had apparently voted on something. I kept my hands steady on the controls. Entry angle at 4 degrees, airspeed nominal. Everything by the book except the part where I had stolen the shuttle and left a formal log entry that was going to require a great deal of paperwork. The clouds cleared. I have flown into a lot of places over the years. Military postings, relay transfers, Union assignments on 4 different planets. You develop a sense for what a place is doing when you come in from above, whether it is tense or collapsed or ordinary, whether the streets have the specific stillness of fear or the specific movement of something functioning. Sao Paulo was functioning. Traffic, markets, the schoolyard I had spotted from higher up was still full of children doing whatever they were doing, with a ball which appeared to involve a great deal of disagreement and no clear resolution, which felt appropriate. The highway running north of the city had congestion near the interchange, which it always had, which it had been having since before I was born. I sat down in the park, killed the engine, sat with my hands on the controls for about 30 seconds. Then I walked out into the afternoon. The woman at the fruit stall said, "What?" She said, "I bought the mango," without thinking. I stood there holding it like evidence. She had said, "We voted." "All of you?" I had asked. The final count was very clear, she had said, and gone back to her fruit. I walked to my mother's apartment on the Rua das Flores, which was 8 blocks from the park in which I had walked approximately 10,000 times in my life, in every emotional condition a person can be in. I had walked it at 15 with a failed exam in my bag, at 22 after my first deployment orders, at 31 when my father Got sick at 38 when he stopped being sick because he stopped being anything. The street was exactly the same. The bakery on the corner was open. The man who always sat outside the pharmacy reading a physical paper book was sitting outside the pharmacy reading physical paper book. There was new graffiti on the wall of the building opposite the corner, which there always was, the city's skin, constantly rewriting itself. I knocked on my mother's door because I had left my key on Marantha 7, which was the kind of logistical failure that happens when you plan a shuttle theft at 2:45. My mother, Carmen Vasquez, 67 years old,